So, welcome to our first week. Hopefully, you've read through the syllabus. I know I've said that a million times, so make sure you read through the syllabus. And this video will be brief, just kind of giving you a background of what we're doing this week, and hopefully outlining kind of more of the why we're doing what we're doing for the class. So, uh, what we're doing in this class is we're studying the first 39 books of what's known as the Bible. The Bible is set up in two halves. The first 39 books are written in Hebrew, just a tad, just a few of chapters in the book of Daniel written in Aramaic, but almost exclusively written in Hebrew. And this is what people call the Hebrew Bible, or better known as the Old Testament. Now, depending on which Christian tradition you're in, if you're Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Anglican, or Episcopal, your Old Testament may look a little different because it may have more books. But in the Protestant Old Testament, so the Presbyterian Church, the Baptist, the Pentecostals, the Methodists, they're all Protestants. And inside their Old Testament, they have 39 books, which we will study because we're a Presbyterian university. The first of the books is maybe one that you know, the book of Genesis. So you turn the table of contents in your Old Testament, you see Genesis and other books like Psalms and Isaiah, and we get all the way to the book of Malachi. That's where our class will stop, and you'll notice there's kind of a part two or another section of 27 other letters, and that is known as the New Testament. That's where we talk about Jesus and St. Paul in the book of Revelation. So our course will deal with the Old Testament. Now the question is, what is the Old Testament? Well, it is the sacred book of the Jewish people. It's also the sacred book of Christians. Christians believe that this is God's word given to humans over a long period of time. God inspired writers using their time period, the historical context, what was going on, what issues were going on. God was revealing God's self through a series of stories, such as, in the beginning, God created, to laws, such as worship on this day. Here's what you do for this sacrifice. Also, ritual practices, such as, kill this animal for this thing. Also in the Old Testament is a series of historical narratives, such as, Joshua went to the city of Jericho, or King David did this thing. But overall, it tells the history of the Israelite people, the Jewish people, the people in the historic nation and the people group, or the historical nation of Israel. It describes how God has related with the world, and then particularly through the Israelites. So you'll hear about Israelite kings, Israelite glory days, Israelites' main worship structure known as the temple, which is in the city of Jerusalem. And also you hear of Israel's downfall and the destruction of the temple and the mourning and grief of exile when the Israelites are taken out of their country into Babylon. And this is where we hear from prophets, people who were speaking for God and helping the people understand what God's path and way was and is. People like Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Malachi, Amos, and Jonah. Also, the Old Testament contains prayers, songs, known as the Book of Psalms. The Old Testament contains a series of wisdom literature dealing with the great questions of life, like what is human suffering in the book of Job? What is life all about? The book of Ecclesiastes. What is love and romantic love? The Song of Songs. And real practical, like what is wisdom and how do you live it out? The book of Proverbs. And finally, the Old Testament is a collection of just simple histories, right? This king at this point, then this king, and here's what happened. So there are moments when you'll read through the Old Testament and you'll say, this is great. The narrative parts seem to read really easy. First, 6 chapters, 7 chapters, 11 chapters of Genesis read so easy. But then you get into places like the book of Leviticus, when it's a series of sacrificial principles, or Chronicles, where you hear so-and-so is the son of so-and-so, and that begins to really train you. You have to remember, the Old Testament is a library inside of one book, written so that people could know about God and what God requires. The Hebrew people will say this is God's gift to the world. God is revealing God's self through the written word, things like the Ten Commandments. Also in the text, we will meet important characters, namely the most important characters we will meet, people like Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. These are characters we meet in the book of Genesis, not to mention Adam and Eve and Noah. But later we hear the most significant person of the Old Testament, the person of Moses. And we hear about him in the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And later we'll hear about people like King David and King Solomon. These will be the characters that we will spend some time with. So in the class, you'll watch some videos, do some readings, and we'll be really spending time in the actual Bible. So there are all kinds of different English translations of the Bible. For our course, I'm going to invite you to look at what's called the NIV, or the New American Version, or the New International Version. It's a modern translation. I mean, I know some people religiously need to read the King James, but I would encourage you to think about spreading yourself out a little bit and reading a modern translation, just because it makes it a little easier to read. So you will have videos from the History Channel, known as Mysteries of the Bible. You'll also do some videos from what's called the Bible Project. A lot of this stuff is on YouTube or Daily Motion, which I'll send links to. So less lectures, more kind of creative videos to help you. Each week you'll have a discussion post where you'll read or watch something, you'll reflect on it, and then a fellow classmate of yours will put a post on there based on what you said, and you will do the same thing each week. So 4 weeks. Your first response to the materials is due by Friday night, and you must respond to at least one classmate by Sunday night every week. So every week, all assignments are due on Sundays. Now, I will say, hey, this is due on Monday the 5th. This is due Monday the 6th. But I give you until the 11th. What I'm trying to avoid you to do is to wait till the last second and try to do all your assignments on the 11th or on that Sunday, because it's going to crush you, right? But in this course, our themes will be really clear. I'm convinced that the Old Testament is a book of justice, asking about what does it look like for God's rule and reign to be enacted in this world, meaning what does it mean to do God's justice? And for that, I don't want you to think about legal courts and lawyers and jails. I want you to think about justice for the oppressed or the forgotten, particularly 2 types of people: slaves and refugees. We hear this the very early part of the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, when God rescues the Hebrew people out of 430 years of slavery, and they wander in the desert. We'll find out people without a homeland becomes a common theme in the Old Testament. You might call them refugees or migrants, immigrants. They're searching for their home. So throughout our class, we'll be thinking about slaves, modern-day slaves, and modern-day refugees. We'll think back to the time of the Bible, but we'll also say, what about our time right now? What does it mean to make a difference and have insight for our time right now? So our final project, the 4th week, will deal with slaves or refugees, depending on what you choose. So I would encourage you to look through the models. What you're going to see is weekly reflections and then daily assignments. And after the first couple of days, we'll get right into reading these passages in the Bible and then you reflecting on it. Any questions? You see my office. I'm at Armington 450. But because you're taking this online and you may be many states away, on the syllabus or in the syllabus is my cell phone number. Feel free to call or text anytime. My email. And as soon as we start class tomorrow, I'll be highly responsive. Probably within 3-4 hours, I'll have you an answer, and maybe right away. Now, if you text me at 2 o'clock in the morning, it might be 6 or 6:30 till I get back to you. But we'll try not to be any more than 6 hours without any kind of answer because this class moves so quickly. The last thing I want to say is this. The Old Testament is a book of faith. And even though you may not have any religious faith at all, which is okay, like that, this class is not about judging your spirituality. This is an academic course. But if you do come from a place of faith or you're curious about what God is doing in the world, I want to encourage you to think about this class as a class that can really help you shape your faith and invite you to know the God of the universe, the God who made everything. This class will move very quickly. We're taking 16 weeks and we're doing it in 4. So that means every day you'll need to be reading and writing and reflecting. We will give you 1 day off a week, so nothing to do on Saturdays. That's the Sabbath day. You'll find more out about that as we move forward in the class. But anyways, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you. Have a great day.